one more time. We'll call this May 16th meeting of the Planning, Zoning, and Agriculture Committee to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Olthoff. Mr. Stauffenberg. Mr. Tripp.
Present.
Mr. Washington. Mr. Tholen. Ms. Polk. Mr. Mulcahy. Mr. Hildebrand. Mr. Einfeld. Mr. Payton. Ms. Peters. Mr. Ritter. Mr. Kinzinger. Mr. Fairfield. Mr. Wheeler. Mr. Lear. We have a quorum.
Thank you. You've received a copy of the April 18th minutes. Are there any additions or corrections? Oh, public, I don't have any. No public comment has been sent to me, so seeing none, we'll continue. Motion to approve the minutes on April 18 by Mr. Payton. Second. Whoa. You have to sign, and there's no green sheets.
There should be.
I think they're like this.
Let's approve the minutes first, and then we'll go on with public comment. Seconded by Mr. Tripp. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. No. Okay, thank you. Would you go to the microphone in the back there, please? Kathleen Kennedy.
Okay, I want
Mike,
to...
excuse me. Mike, would you raise the microphone for her?
Let's go down. A little more. Oh, well, this will do. This will do.
Thank you, Michael.
All
Yes,
right,
ma'am.
According to the 2013 solar report, annual Illinois electrical load was 187,875,624 megawatts. That number divided by the stated output of the Nugent proposal which is 70 megawatt, would times the 400 acres would require additional proposals to meet the demand of the state of Illinois using solar over $1,257,253,744 acres to meet the equivalent demand put out by what we're currently demanding in the year 2013. Also, I would request you table this vote until the state of Illinois releases or completes its statewide agricultural mitigation plan. I don't believe anything should go forward until this is completed. ComEd should be present with its agreements with all special use permits. 121-9934C solar farm requests. and present how the power will be metered. The county should present its perceived income from the approval of the numerous special use permits, 12199 C34 solar farms, from agricultural versus the loss of farmland. A detailed dollar amount should be calculated and made public, not random estimates. All comments related to the Highland Road Solar Farm also apply to the Staley Solar proposal and the Kevin Nugent, otherwise known as ZBA case 18-16, special use permit, 12199C34 solar farm. In addition to waiting on the Illinois Agricultural Impact Mitigation Agreements, the Farm Bureau should present their plan. Also, as stated in the public comment, this proposed Highland Solar Road, all decommission requirements shall pass to any succeeding owners of the property. Property values will most certainly go down, as in my property, which is surrounded, and the characteristics of the property will indeed change. 8-foot chain link fence, a heated island downstream of hazardous waste, a view of sea of solar panels, all preceding replacing a corn or soybean field, definitely affects the characteristics and saleability of that property. All factors mentioned by the public comment on the Highland Road Committee definitely apply to this request also. A decommission requirement should include repairs to any and all damaged drain tiles. Water use in the county presentations, which was a file named Solar Farms PZA.pdf. I quote slide 28 of 31. Water use, very little water used. In order to get the full voltage of the panels must be cleaned regularly. This will require large amounts of water to clean the surface of 130 acres of solar panel surface area. Are they going to truck in the water? And where will all that runoff go? So slide 28 of 31, entitled Impacts of Mitigation, is disputed by public comment on your May 8, 2018 County Board meeting. That was dated on the YouTube video of your meeting. All comments given by the following regarding Highland Road Solar Farm should be considered. They include, but not limited to, comments by Connie Ferris from Bonfield regarding the hazardous waste, the Memigas, Julie Elroy, Thomas Elroy, and Thomas H. Elroy. Also, Don Waltherer regarding the drainage district rights and easements. The facts presented by the Highland Solar Road Farm public comment apply to any special use permit. 121-99C34 solar farm. In particular, ZBA case 18-16, 18-17, 18-18, 18-23, 18-21, and 18-22. And this is a quote from that solar report. The total annual Illinois load was 187,875,624 megawatts after excluding the net load from the state's rural electric co-ops, cooperatives, and municipal electric utilities. So you can see it's a very small percentage of the total demand. in the state of Illinois. Thank you.
Thank you. Going on to the building report.
Somewhere in that pile of papers on your desk is the monthly building division report for April. Should look like this. Okay, for April, we issued 70 total permits with a valuation of $5,576,941, and we collected fees of $27,250. Comparable to the same month last year, we had 74 permits last year for the month of April, and we collected $21,632 in fees. So we are progressing upwards from last year. Sorry about that. Did you need me to repeat it? Okay. All right. Total permits for April 2018 were 70, with a valuation of $5,576,941, and we collected fees of $27,250. Total fees for the month was $29,725 when you take into consideration all of the extra fees and re-inspections and fines. Comparable to the same month last year, we had 74 permits and we collected $21,632. So we are up a little bit from last year. We had two fairly large projects on this in this month. One under the agricultural category of $1.8 million and one under the commercial category of $1.5 million. I've also looked at contractor registration. For April 2018, we've collected $24,800, and comparable to last year was $27,300, so we're a little low on that. Also to note, it's not part of the building report, but zoning board collection fees last year this is year to date from December 1st till April 30th. Last year we collected $3,940 in zoning board fees. This year we're at $112,070.
Wow.
Huge jump.
Big jump. Any questions? Motion to approve would be in order by Mr. Mulcahy and Mr. Washington. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Going on to stormwater, MS4 program discussion.
All right. As part of our MS4 stormwater program, I am required at every planning and zoning meeting to ask if there are any stormwater issues that you'd like to discuss.
Seeing none, going on to the appointment of Bob Bedell to the Kankakee County Board of Examiners and Appeals.
Okay. Mr. Bedell has applied to be the commercial contractor on the Kankakee Board of Examiners and Appeals, and we're asking that you approve that appointment.
Is there a motion by Mr. Tripp, seconded by Mr. Kinzinger? Any discussion?
This
Peters.
Just checking all the bases. Did anyone else apply?
No.
Thank
And
you.
this will give us a full board.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Under zoning, ZBA case 1816, request for a special use permit 121-99C34 solar farm and variance to section 121 99C34 setbacks in the A1 agriculture district on a parcel generally situated in section 25 and 26 of Rockville Township. Petitioners are Nugent Farm LLC and the Kevin J. Nugent Declaration of Trust dated July 20th, 2004, property owners, and Staley Solar LLC applicant.
Okay, this is actually two different actions. There's a special use permit request and a request for variance from setbacks. I've asked the developer to give the same presentation that they gave at zoning board, just so that the planning and zoning committee is up to speed on the particulars of the case. Diane, can you switch us over, gentlemen?
Let me know when you're ready, Delbert.
Okay, you got, it's on.
Okay. Ready? Okay. Good morning. I'm David Silverman. I'm with the law firm of Ansel Glink in Chicago. I'm the attorney for the applicant for the Staley Solar Project. With me today is John Soininen from Lend-Lease. He's the project manager for the company on this. Also with us are Jason Cooper from Kimley Horn, the consulting engineer, and can provide technical engineering information for any questions you may have. Andrew Lines, who I think you might know from previous petitions, who I think will also be here this evening, is here from Cohn Resnick and can provide property valuation information on the project. We are here after our public hearing at the ZBA last week. We did receive a positive recommendation for our special use permit and no recommendation for our variations concerning the setbacks on the perimeter of the property. I'll give a quick project overview. I'm going to really leave it to John to kind of get into the specifics of the project, but just to kind of set the stage for the presentation you'll have today. The project sits on 400 acres of agricultural land in the county. It is subject to a boundary agreement between Manteno and Bourbonnais and sits on the Manteno side of that boundary agreement. The 400 acres are all zoned A1 agricultural, and the property is surrounded by farming activities, residences, and a church, also zoned in the A1 district. Part of the property is designated as an agricultural conservation area in the county's 2030 comp plan. That's the area west of North 1500 West Road and south of West 7000 North Road. The balance of the property sits in a community growth area, also in the comp plan. A large portion of the property is diagonally bisected by a gas main easement, and the southwestern corner of the property is subject to a ComEd utility easement accommodating high-tension overhead power lines. Again, John's going to provide more specifics about the project in a minute, but as a general overview, 30,000 foot, the proposed project is a 70 megawatt utility scale solar energy facility that will take advantage of the property's close proximity to ComEd's Davis Creek substation. The property will be developed with solar arrays, inverter stations, chain link perimeter fencing, internal access road, and except for the specific variations being requested to the perimeter setbacks, it will be developed in accordance with all county codes. The site plan, site design was done in response to concerns that were raised by surrounding property owners. Lend-Lease has made several attempts and has successfully talked to several of the surrounding property owners to get their concerns and to try to design this to be as responsive as possible to concerns that were raised. The inverter stations will be located within the property to create a situation where there will be no real ambient noise from the facility at the property line. Landscaping is also planned in areas around surrounding properties to provide adequate visual buffering from the facility itself. The project itself does address statewide policy goals as well as county policy goals to promote solar energy development for not only the county but the states. And at 70 megawatts, the project will generate at peak capacity enough clean renewable energy to power 1/3 of the households in Kankakee County. So as Delbert explained, we are seeking two forms of zoning relief: a special use permit to develop, operate, and maintain a 70 megawatt photovoltaic solar energy facility in the A1 district, and variations on setbacks around the perimeter, around some of the properties, around the perimeter of the property, to account for the loss of the property that we can't build on as a result of those two easements that I mentioned earlier. And now with that, I'm going to turn it over to John Soininen to go into the specifics of the project, and we'll be available for questions.
Thank you.
Good morning, thank you. As David said, my name is John Soininen, and I'm with Lend Lease. I'm just going to ask you to take a look at the presentation here while I run through these slides and hopefully provide you with details on the project, and then happy to take questions. So, who is Lend Lease? Lend Lease is an Australian company established in 1958. We've got operations across the globe, really in 4 main regions in 10 countries. We're a publicly listed company on the Australian Securities and Exchange. We've got a market capitalization of approximately $10 billion. We are headquartered in the United States in New York. The energy group that I work for is based out of Dallas, and I am based in Boston and cover the Northeast. Lend Lease is a international construction and development company. We are focused on infrastructure and vertical build construction and development. We currently have approximately $50 billion in development pipeline, a little over $20 billion in construction backlog, and we've got more than 12,000 employees around the globe. Our energy development experience specifically, we're a relatively small team based in Dallas. There's about 15 professionals focused on renewable energy development. We've got significant experience in solar, wind, and thermal generation. Lend Lease at this point is focused solely on renewable energy generation because that is, in fact, the future of the energy space. Renewable energy at this time is cost competitive with thermal generation and has numerous benefits, not the least of which is clean and sustainable. Lend Lease Energy Development currently has a solar pipeline of approximately 2 gigawatts focused in the coasts where energy is expensive and in significant demand, and also in the Texas region, which is very sunny, and throughout the center of the country. Most recently, Lend Lease has completed an 8.5 megawatt project for the Eastern Kentucky Power Cooperative. And to talk specifically about this project, as David indicated, we are located west of Career Center Road and just north and south of 7000 Road, which is depicted in the upper right-hand corner of the slide you see there before you. I know you're familiar with solar, but just to touch on it briefly, to make sure we're all talking the same language here, we are proposing a solar array of just under 400 acres, solar panels. Those solar panels are then wired to central inverters. The central inverters convert that electricity from direct current to alternating current, which is what we use throughout our electrical infrastructure. We've got medium voltage transformers that step up the alternating current coming out of the inverters to medium voltage, approximately 34,000 volts, to the collector system throughout the solar facility. That is then transmitted to a substation, which steps that power up to the line voltage to interconnect with the electrical grid at the Davis Creek substation, and that's 138,000 volts. This is a section through the typical solar farm, just to provide some context and scale. You can see in the center there is a typical pickup truck for reference. Left of that is an inverter station, approximately 7 feet high, and to the right are the solar array. The solar panels are mounted on single axis trackers, so these panels will move throughout the course of the day, collecting the light coming from the east in the morning and move throughout the day as the sun tracks overhead. We have specified First Solar Series 6 panels here. Those panels are approximately 6.5 feet tall and about 4 feet wide. And the tracking support structures are about 14 feet on center. So at the end of the day, approximately a third of the surface area, if you will, is covered by solar panels, and there's significant green space in between all of these panels, and that is maintained. Here's a site plan. It's a little bit difficult to see at this scale. And I'm sorry, my laser pointer doesn't work on the screen here. But in the northeast corner, traversing diagonally to the southwest, you'll see a diagonal line. That is the gas line easement that really bifurcates the site and disrupts the array, which is part of the reason that we're requesting the variance. And then you can see the People's Church is in the lower southeastern corner of the project area, and there's a couple of residences along Career Center Road, just north of 7000 Road. I've got some blow-ups here to try and show you specifically what it is that we're requesting relative to the variance. And again, I apologize, it's a little bit difficult to see at the scale we have here, but on the eastern edge, we're looking at 1000 Road or Career Center Road. We had originally intended to comply and not be requesting a variance from setback in this location. Our initial interpretation of the setback requirement was that it was from the center line of the road. Based on the hearing that we had with the ZBA, it was made clear that in fact there is a assumed 60-foot wide right-of-way to Career Center Road, so 30 feet on either side of center line. So essentially, this green line starting in the northeast corner and heading south is intended to demonstrate that would be a vegetated buffer. There would be a 30-foot right-of-way from center line of road, and then we've got a 70-foot setback from that to any solar panels. And again, in that area, we've got proposed vegetation and a chain link fence. Traveling south, when you get to the lower center of the slide here, you'll see the label of residential property. And in that location, we have proposed to comply with the 100-foot setback. No variance requested around the residential property. The fence will not be on the property line. It will be pulled back from the property line, and there will be vegetated buffer in that location. This shot then takes you further south. You can see that same residential property I was just speaking to now in the upper left-hand corner of the screen. That same buffer applies along Career Center Road, and then we get down to the People's Church, where again we are requesting no variance. We're complying with the 100-foot setback. We're pulling the fence back off of the property line. We're not putting the fence directly on the property line. We're pulling the fence back much closer to the panels, and we are volunteering to put significant vegetated buffer on our property within that 100-foot setback to satisfy the People's Church. And then south of the People's Church along Career Center Road, based on consultations with the pasture, we've actually agreed to increase the setback so as not to be in their front door, so to speak. And we have the fence line in that location, the setback in that location, 150 feet from Career Center Road. And then this is the north western corner of the proposed project area. And I just put this here to show you that along the northern border, where there would be a 50-foot setback to adjacent agricultural property. This is, farm field. In that area, we were requesting a reduction from a 50-foot setback. So the standard setback between these two adjacent fields for structure would be 50 feet. We're requesting that be reduced along the purple line from 50 feet to 25 feet. And again, the fence line for the project would be pulled, in this instance, south, so it would not be directly on the property line. It would be pulled south approximately 15 feet to give some space to the neighbor. On the western edge here, we've requested that the right-of-way be reduced, the setback be reduced from 100 feet to 50 feet. This is as I understand it, very seldom traveled road, and the requirement of a 100-foot setback significantly impacts our energy production, and so we're requesting that in that location, the setback be reduced to 50 feet. We have taken a look here at a number of key observation points throughout the project area, where either there are residences or people congregating or passing by on a regular basis, to try and provide some context for all of you here as to how this facility will appear once constructed. But before I do that, I'm actually just going to digress for a moment and pull you back to this slide, because there's a couple of key points that I forgot to mention here. These solar panels on this solar array, the axis point of that rotating panel, if you will, is about 4.5 feet off the ground. So the highest point of these panels is about 6.5 feet off the ground. So it's really not it's not significantly taller than corn or what would otherwise be growing in these fields. We're not putting significant structures in here. The other key point that I want to note is that the structure of these array racks, there's no concrete involved. These are really not permanent structures. Steel piles are being driven into the ground, and at decommissioning, all of that material is removed from the site. So I just want to encourage you to not think of this as a residential subdivision where property is being split up, foundations are being put in, and permanent structures are going to forever or for a significant period of time impact the property. These solar panels, racking systems, the piles are going to be driven into the ground, and upon decommissioning, it's all going to come out. Use of the land is going to revert to the landowner, and it can very easily be put back to an agricultural or other use. Key observation points. The first point here, my eyes are, I guess, not doing me justice. We are looking out the back of the People's Church. They have a fairly significant piece of property. The setback, and I'm going to ask one of these guys to jump in and correct me if I'm wrong. I believe the distance from the back of the church property to the property line is about 900 feet. And so what you're seeing here on the horizon on the left side of the screen is the existing transmission line, and you can see a number of tower structures. That's the existing substation. And then the blips, if you will, bouncing along the horizon are the vegetative plantings that we are proposing to install. So again, because there's a significant distance and because these panels are really pretty low to the ground, there's not a significant visual impact to seeing this facility at distance. Another key observation point here, this is along 7000 Road. We've got a view looking south and a view looking north. This is where we have proposed to reduce the setback from 100 feet to 50 feet. And so the fence line is set back from the road about 30 feet, and then there's a little bit of vegetation inside the fence before the solar panels. This is at the residences north of the People's Church. If I'm not mistaken, this is where Mrs. Kennedy's property is. This is looking to the west. And again, the vegetation that you're seeing is the vegetative planting that we're proposing. to disrupt any visual impact associated with the solar array that at this distance to some extent blends in with the horizon. A little bit more of a close-up from a residential property across Career Center Road, looking at what essentially the view is from Career Center Road. So significant green space, vegetated buffer that we're proposing to plant, fence, and then panels obscured behind those. This is in the southeastern corner of the project, where we have proposed to increase the setback from the 100 feet required. So this would actually be a 120-foot setback beyond the 60-foot road right-of-way to satisfy the pastor and the members of the People's Church, listening to their concerns. So we've agreed to pull this further back off of Career Center Road to keep the main corridor to the People's Church greener and more open. This is from the southwest corner of the property, looking towards the substation that exists presently. And this is from southeast of the property, looking north towards the People's Church. Direct economic impacts. This project will bring jobs and tax revenue to this area. As indicated previously, renewable energy is the future of energy development in the United States. It's currently cost competitive with traditional thermal generation and significantly cleaner. So it's in fact the direction that the United States is going. At this point, thermal projects in California are being declined, and California is racing to figure out how to address their energy needs with renewables and with energy storage. So the benefits to this region, specifically from this project, is a capital investment of $75 million into the area, with an estimate of approximately $15 million of that going to purchase local labor and construction materials. During the operational phase of the project, it'll be about $500,000 a year spent annually on operations, and we would estimate that a little under $400,000 of that would be spent locally for operations, maintenance, mowing, management, and what have you. My eyes are not good enough to read this slide at this distance, to be perfectly honest, and I haven't committed it to memory. I think I've touched on all of these subjects. Let me just take a quick look. $75 million.
Use what?
Yeah, shame on me for.
You can pull the mic out of the stand if you want.
All right, we'll do that. Thank you. So yeah, I'll just run through these bullet points here quickly. The first one, as I just mentioned, is the local economic benefit of a capital investment. Staley Solar will result in a significant reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. It will not result in any increase in ambient noise within the area. And it will, in all likelihood, be a significant benefit to groundwater infiltration as opposed to the current row crop use. And I'm going to turn the slide deck over in a minute here to Andrew to talk to you a little bit about no negative impacts to adjoining property values. And then number 6 is what I highlighted earlier, that really at the end of the day, we have the obligation to decommission this facility. So we'll be putting forth financial security in excess of $400,000 to ensure that when this property or facility stops operating, it is professionally and completely decommissioned. So all of the solar panels go away, steel goes away, everything comes out of the ground to a depth of 3 feet. and the property can then be very easily reverted back to an agricultural or other use because it has not been subdivided and it does not have permanent structures on it. So that's the overview of the project from my perspective, and you guys tell me if you want to get into questions now or if you want Andrew to finish the presentation and then hold all your questions for the end. I'm
Let's
happy to.
finish the presentation.
Okay, great.
Good morning. It's a great day in the land of Lincoln. My name is Andrew Lines. I work for a company called Cohn Resnick. We are a advisory, assurance, and tax firm. We're national, about 3,500 employees. And we have a specialty in working with commercial real estate companies. I've seen many of you before, so I'm happy to be here again. I'm actually pinch hitting for my boss and leader, Patricia McGar, who is an MAI, a member of the Appraisal Institute. I'm also a member of the Appraisal Institute. She is a certified general commercial appraiser in many states, including Illinois and surrounding states. And she last year was appointed by Governor Rauner to be on the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulations Real Estate Appraisal Board. So she helps set the rules for appraisers. We prepared an impact study for Lend-Lease, looking at existing solar farms and measured whether or not properties that were immediately adjacent to those solar farms were selling and had marketing times that were consistent with properties that were locationally removed from the solar farms, properties that we believe didn't have any influence by that solar farm itself. So that's really the purpose of the impact study. We want to know whether or not if you build a solar farm, the adjacent properties to that farm are going to face any negative consequences by virtue of that new development. So one thing you guys should know is that the state of Illinois has had very few solar farms that have been erected over the last 5 years, while the state of Indiana has had much more activity. So many of the existing solar farms that we were able to study that had data that we were able to review come from right across the border in the state of Indiana. We didn't choose states like on the East Coast or on the West Coast just because those topographies, climates, and kind of what drives value are a little bit different. So we felt like we did a really good job there. We also studied a very large solar farm, 100 megawatts in Chisago, Minnesota. And this was a solar farm that was developed over 1,000 acres. In fact, there were 6 homes that were in a small, maybe about a 25 or 30 acre area, which had solar arrays on all 4 sides. So we've seen developments that appear to really change the landscape for views, but we weren't able to find any data that would suggest that those property values were diminished by that fact. In fact, we spoke and interviewed a real estate broker named Candace Rindle of RE/MAX, a real estate broker with 16 years of experience in that Chisago County, Minnesota area, who personally sold 2 homes that were neighboring the solar farm. And she reported that the neighboring homes sold at market rates comparable to other homes in the area, not influenced by the solar farm at all, and that they sold within 45 days of offering at the end of 2017, which was absolutely in line with the market. So we've actually studied about 15 different existing solar farms, 8 of which yielded enough data for us to draw meaningful conclusions. When I talk about meaningful conclusions, this is based on a very large textbook, and I think some of you have seen me bring it to one of these meetings, that was written by a wonderful professor named Randy Bell, who's an MAI like I am and also a PhD in real estate science. And what he talks about is we're going to do a matched paired sales analysis, where we're going to compare test areas to control areas. And if a legitimate detrimental condition exists, then there will likely be a measurable and consistent difference between the two sets of market data, meaning the test areas, which are immediately around the solar farm, and the control areas, which are located removed from that potential influence. And one of the other things that we did, just so you understand some of the science behind this, is that we didn't just look at one home and one home, right? Everyone knows everyone's home is a little bit different, even if they kind of look the same from the outside. So we compared in the test areas, if we found one sale that occurred after a solar farm was developed, okay, we'll compare that with a group of homes that are very similar in age, construction, and size. So we're really looking at the differences between the medians, so the one sale versus the many sales. And we would think that if there was a detrimental condition, that we would see that one sales in many different areas would all have lower median sale prices than the groups of homes or the groups of farmland that we studied. So here's, I'll just highlight a couple of them. This is one in Indianapolis. This was, I believe, a 20 megawatt facility, so fairly large. And we were able to look at some residential land that was located immediately north, right across the street, within 150, 200 feet of existing solar panels. And so we found a few sales that occurred right there, immediately adjacent. And then we also found some sales that were removed. So others that were located further north in the same subdivision. And then two other subdivisions that were constructed by the exact same builder in the relatively same amount of time. And what you're seeing here is a percentage that's extremely low in the variance between the median sale prices. And that indicates to us that there's no meaningful difference in having a home that's across the street from a solar farm and one that's removed from the solar farm. In addition, we saw that there was about a 10-acre tract of land. It was a little bit narrow, and this was developed with a very large estate home and massive in-ground swimming pool, which sounds really nice on a warm day. And that was located 150 feet between the house and the panels themselves, not just the property line. Well, why would somebody build a massive estate home with a huge in-ground swimming pool immediately adjacent to a solar farm if they felt like there was a detrimental condition by being next to that solar array? So the market is telling us that that's just not the case. Here's a picture of the home. It's a nice home and very consistent with some of the nicer homes here in Kankakee County. Here's another farm that we looked at. This was in Portage. And this is an example of being able to see what a farmette located next to a solar farm would be, in addition to some homes. And so we saw that the farmette had sold at a per acre price of right around $8,000 per acre. And that it wasn't different from any of the other farmettes or small farm sales that we were seeing in that area. And the person who bought that farmette also built an estate home that we believe had a cost estimate about $465,000 with direct views of the solar farm. And it even has second story windows, so you know that they're looking right out on it when they wake up in the morning. Again, didn't see any scientific evidence to suggest that being located next to the solar farm would impact their property value. Here's a summary of all of the different impact studies that we've done. Again, on average, you're talking less than 2% difference. When you see a plus, that means that the home or the farm that was located right next to the solar farm actually sold a little bit higher than the surrounding data that we were able to review. I'm not suggesting that being next to the solar farm is going to increase your property value, but this study certainly shows that it won't detract from it. Lastly, I'll leave you that we interviewed every county and township assessor located in an area that had a solar farm. And not one of these assessors told us that they had seen any data that suggested that being next to the solar farm was detrimental to property values. And even further, Not one of them told us that anyone had petitioned to reduce their assessment for being located next to a solar farm. And when we put all of that data together, we at CohnReznick don't believe that there's any concern to being located to a newly developed solar farm. Here's a list of all the assessors that we spoke with and a couple of the brokers. Again, a great number of people in areas that have had solar farms for 2, 3, 5, 6 years. And no one is suggesting that there's a concern with property values. And there you have it. Thank you so much for your time, and happy to take questions after the presentation is fulfilled.
You ready for questions now?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Questions from the committee? Mr. Washington.
What is the lifetime of an undamaged solar panel?
The expectation is currently 25 plus years. So the manufacturer's warranty extends to 25 years.
Thank you.
Mr. Kinzinger.
I have 4 questions. I think this is a new presentation for this committee. Could you describe the solar panel you're using and anything that makes it better than your competitors who are also proposing solar panels? Are you using the same solar panel or one that's better?
Sure. Great question. I'm happy to speak to what we've specified in the application. I'm not sure that I'm familiar.
PV. Are all PV solar panels the same, or is there Chevys and Cadillacs? Are there Chevys and Cadillacs?
That's a good question. I think there certainly are some differences, and some panels are more efficient and produce slightly more electricity than other panels.
I'm more concerned about damage in terms of wind, in terms of breakage, those types of issues.
Yeah, so at this point in time, solar panels are essentially a global commodity. There's really,
I'm more concerned about the panel you're using.
Yep.
Is it, do you have any statistics on that in terms of what it is? Is it a Chevy or a Cadillac?
It's a thin film PV panel, and I guess I would put it more on the Cadillac end of the spectrum. Our intent is to use high quality equipment to generate as much clean renewable electricity as possible. So these panels are designed to withstand hurricane force winds, and panels can certainly be damaged. If there's a hailstorm with grapefruit sized hail, are panels going to get damaged? Yes, they potentially are. If there's a hailstorm with pea-sized hail, then that's of no concern.
Do you have any statistics in terms of what type of hail or wind will damage those panels?
I'd be happy to get you some statistics.
So you don't know at this time?
Off the top of my head, I have not committed the manufacturer's statistics to memory, no.
There's, in your book, you show those panels mounted on concrete, and you testified that they were going to be pile driven. Which is the case? The literature indicates they're mounted on concrete piers.
Yeah, our intention for this site is that they will be driven piles. They will not be concrete.
There's an issue with potential issue, and it goes with this variance. It looks like you're locating your inverter on the far corner of this property, which is also a request for a 25-foot variance. It's my understanding that the inverter is the only thing that makes noise, and with a 400-acre tract, how much noise is this thing going to make this close to somebody else's property?
I'm going to go back to the site layout here for you and try and
It's C 4.0 on the drawings.
clarify that. So
In
here's
the lower right-hand corner.
here's the
Lower left-hand.
lower left-hand corner is sure. So I think I can handle it. I can defer to the technical guys if I get out of my my realm here. What's shown in the lower left-hand corner is the step-up transformer. So that is the transformer that takes all of the electricity from the facility and steps it up to line voltage. The inverters are the noisiest part of the facility, and those inverters are distributed throughout the facility. You'll see the dark black lines with boxes on them. Those are the inverters. And,
So the substation won't generate noise.
the substation will generate very minimal amounts of noise. There are some cooling fans associated with the transformer, but it's not a noisy operation. It's like the equipment that is in the existing substation just south of there.
Final question.
Okay.
I'm a little concerned with the request for variance setbacks when I see like 7,000 Road coming into 1,000 West Road, or 1,500 West Road dumping into 7,000 West Road. We're testifying that it's corn height, so to speak. Has this been run? I guess that's the wrong question to ask you. Have you checked anything in terms of visual restrictions at these intersections for cars and trucks?
So, sure.
This variance.
It's a great question. My understanding is that there's stop signs at those intersections. And so with the setback that we proposed of more than going horizontally would be 25 feet, and going vertically it's 70 feet. So if you're traveling westbound on 7,000 Road and come into Career Center Road, the setbacks both north and south of you are 70 feet back from the 30-foot wide road right of way. So you have a significant 70 feet of space where you have very clear sight lines both north and south.
But you have a landscape bushes in front of that.
We have landscape within the 70 feet.
Yeah,
yes,
that's my
but
concern.
the intent is that there's 30 plus feet of green space, and then approximately a 30-foot vegetated buffer.
I can further answer that. Our ordinance requires a sight triangle at all intersections, which is 15 feet in each direction. So this does meet that.
Mr. Tripp.
I haven't heard anything, read anything about would the electric grid that's going to be generated have any effect on the sound system of the church? I've seen this happen before with television transmitting and radio things, and that's an important function of that church. I don't know if anybody's addressed that or not.
So I can't address that specifically, but I can address it generally. Generally electrical devices have some type of electromagnetic field associated with them. The electromagnetic field generated by the solar panels and the infrastructure that we will be installing dissipates to be essentially equivalent with that of the Earth generally at 150 feet. So with a setback of 100 feet from the church's property line, I don't know what the distance is from the church's property line internally to their various facilities, but I cannot imagine a scenario in which any electrical current has any effect on that. Our intent with this facility is to take as much solar energy as we can, collect it in the solar panels, and transmit that to the electrical grid. So the electrical engineers are very focused on doing that and not creating any stray voltage or any excess electromagnetic frequency.
If that happened, would they have a filter system that would be furnished?
I'm not sure how one could identify that. I mean, there's currently existing high voltage transmission lines just south of the church. So if there was going to be any electromagnetic interference, it would be from the 138,000 volt lines that are a few hundred feet south of the church.
There will be no panels over the easement for the gas pipeline, is that correct?
That's correct.
That's what those on your map.
That's why on the site plan you'll see
right.
the easement and then the odd squares,
right,
if you will, and that is because the electrical design requires that the system be balanced in terms of amperage voltage and what's being put into each of the inverter stations, and so that results in this rectangular layout, and we can't do diagonals.
The pipeline company was taken into account on this, I assume.
Candidly, I have not had direct discussions with them. I don't know all of the history of that. I'm not sure if David can answer that question, but before we do any type of construction, there will certainly be detailed communication, and we're staying out of their easement.
So the easement has restrictions on what can be placed over it, obviously with concerns about harming the line. So we will develop this site consistent with all of the easement restrictions in place, and that was taken into account when this was laid out.
With the pipeline company?
Well, I cannot say specifically because I did not have conversations with them. But again, we would have to observe all of the restrictions of the easement in place when we're building it. We can't interfere with the easement rights of the gas pipeline company, which presumably has not only access, but a safety distance to ensure that its mains are protected.
Right.
But no, I did not have a specific conversation with them about this.
Okay. Mr. Stauffenberg.
Thank you, Chairman. Has anybody done a study on what this means to the average homeowner? I'm assuming this is going to help lower ComEd rates in the area. I'm hoping that's what it's going to do. Has anybody done a study on what it would result in for the average homeowner? A 1% reduction, a 2%?
That's a great question. I can't answer that question for you. I don't know if the state has undertaken a study like that. Maybe somebody else can speak to it specifically.
Did you say this would supply 70% of the homes in the county? Did somebody say that?
It'll probably approximately
1/3. Okay.
1/3 of the homes, and that's annual generation from a clean renewable source. So I think the real concrete short-term benefits are a reduction in carbon and the combustion of fossil fuels. And the advantage of a project like this is that it is stably priced energy. So when we enter into a power purchase agreement with ComEd, another utility, corporate industrial user in this area, our power price is set for the next 15 to 20 years, depending on exactly how the contract is negotiated. But the advantage truly is that it is long-term stable priced power. And as you probably have seen historically, power prices ratchet up every year because of fuel uncertainty, right? And so we have no fuel uncertainty. Or if we do, we have a real big problem if the sun's not shining.
Sure.
So stable priced power for everybody in the county is something that they can rely on.
I have one follow-up question. I think I've heard through these presentations that these projects are somewhat subsidized.
Sure, great question.
So they wouldn't go forward if that subsidy didn't happen?
These projects are not subsidized in any way. So
really?
this project will be built 100% with private capital. The advantage to renewable energy projects such as this is that there is an investment tax credit. So corporations with large tax liability historically have invested in these types of projects because they can get a tax credit after the fact. So that system was put in place by the federal government to incentivize private investment into renewable energy projects such as this. So it's 100% built with private capital. The federal government then does offer a tax incentive to those investors.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay.
Thank you,
Chairman
Mr.
Wheeler.
Chairman. Yeah, I've got a few, and apologize for these. I've been writing them down and remembering things I had in the past. First of all, Dell, on our comprehensive plan, I don't remember ever seeing part of this area as part of preservation of farmland as part of our comprehensive plan. I heard that, and I don't know.
Yeah, the majority of our county is actually in the ag preservation category.
So this specific area is just part of a general overview statement of preservation of
That it should be
agriculture.
preserved for agricultural use.
So does the owner of that farmland believe it should be preserved, or is the owner of the farmland
He does
asking?
not. In your packet, there is a letter from the owner of the farmland. It should look like this.
Okay.
That states his desire to use his property for a solar farm.
Okay. So the
Can I,
owner of the farmland is actually determining what he wants to
Keep
do
in
with
mind,
his own
yeah,
land.
and
Okay.
keep in mind too, the county board declared solar farms a permittable use in the agricultural district, thus being an agricultural use
Okay.
when it adopted its solar farm ordinance.
Sure, thank you for that. Now, towards the company, one question was asked, what happens when these, about damage? What happens to the internal workings of a solar panel when it's damaged? Is there like this evil juice that leaks out into the ground?
There is not evil juice.
Okay.
There is no toxic substance that can leach from these panels. It's essentially a glass panel with silica in it and electronics. So at the end of the day, I wouldn't advise smashing one of these up and eating it.
Right.
But there's nothing that leaches out of these panels.
So if it's hit by lightning, is there a melting point?
I don't know what the melting point of glass is, but we've got glass and aluminum and copper. Probably
Pretty high,
has the lowest.
2,500 degrees is what I was told in the past.
Yes, but
So-
again, so lightning for these facilities is typically not a significant concern. Being electrical in nature, these are all very extensively grounded. So these are neutral. With high transmission lines south and west of this area, I really can't envision a scenario where electricity is gonna be attracted to the panels over those high tension towers.
There's a lot of comments, and thank you for that. There's a lot of comments and concerns about drainage. Have you been provided a drainage map of what exists as far as tiles before you sited this or while you were siting this area?
Yes. So that has been taken into consideration. We've been talking with the landowner. There is some historical information. I probably need to defer to the civil and environmental guys to get into the specifics of that, but it's definitely been taken into consideration, and to the extent there's any damage, we understand it's our obligation to repair to ensure that the drainage system is working properly. I think the other thing to note is, as I indicated previously, 2/3 of this site is going to continue to be impervious coverage. So, the rainwater is going to naturally leach in. It's not going to be arid soil and create runoff. That's going to be consumed by that surface vegetation for the most part.
So in that aspect, as far as Dell is concerned, that all has to be addressed before any actually building permits are issued.
That is correct. We will review final design at the building permit stage.
Okay. So they have to comply with any of those concerns,
Our
any drainage
stormwater
district
ordinance,
concerns?
floodplain ordinance, building codes.
Okay, all right.
Can I address that?
Sure,
I mean, then
please.
you can go on.
Please.
I assume that when you have a main going through a field, that you would probe that and find out where it is, and your pilings would avoid that main and not necessarily on the feeder lines, because they're smaller, and if they're damaged, it would show up later, and then you would fix those. I mean, you're not gonna...
Absolutely. So there will be geotech analysis done to determine where the existing structures are, and we're going to do everything we can to avoid those. We don't want to damage them and have to repair them. So we're going to work around them to the greatest extent possible.
No, that's a good question. The gas line, the easement, does that easement that obviously can't be anything built over the top, is that also where the gas company would use as a road to get to and from for repairs on that gas line? Or is there things on each side of it that they would be able to drive up on? I'm not sure how that works. That's why I'm asking.
Yes, so as it is currently, it's underneath an agricultural field. So there's nothing that prevents the landowner currently from tilling the soil and operating agricultural use above that. So our intent is that it would simply be green space vegetated with a grass mix. To the extent they need to get in there for emergency repairs, absolutely, but there's nothing within this site that is something that would be being maintained regularly. So they don't currently have a road or an access corridor. It's underground pipeline.
All right. You explained the vegetative buffer. I didn't know if it was going to be eggplants or evergreens. I didn't know what was going to be out in front of there. So
Sure, it's actually a mix of some deciduous trees, some coniferous trees, and a number of different, a couple of different shrubs.
Is that a vegetarian question?
yes, it is. You said something about 3 feet at decommissioning. You said, is it everything above 3 feet is taken out?
That's correct.
So if there's any steel driven beyond 3 feet, then that stays?
That's certainly not the intention. I think the way the decommissioning plan was written, it specifically states anything down to 3 feet will be removed. So electrical conduits, wires that are within the ground, we're saying absolutely we're committing to taking everything out that's down 3 feet. To the extent a steel pile is driven, I mean, there's no way to go down 3 feet and cut it off, right? It's just going to get plucked back out of the ground.
Okay.
And that material is all valuable from a recycling standpoint. So I think that's the other thing to consider here is, you know, there's really an economic interest in removing all of this from the site in the future because it can be recycled.
Sure. This is a question for the chairman. Not a concern, just a question. On, you know, combines and discs and all that on a narrower road, are you still able to operate in that space to be able to make a corner or get down the road if somebody's driving down some of these roads with
we can
all the
usually see
attachments?
over it.
I mean, as far as the actual width to get through there.
Well,
I mean,
we're limited as to, we need to maintain about a 15-foot width. And if it's wider than that, we trailer it.
Okay.
So,
I see. Okay, so that's not a concern.
And the road width is not changing on these.
Correct, just the amount of what's there. Okay. And this was, the last thing was a question for Cone Resnick, Andrew. It's 2 questions. The first thing is I there was a comment from a previous situation where one of the applicants said, oh yeah, that house in Indy, sure, they built a palace or a estate there, but they probably got the property for $10 because it wasn't worth anything. Was there any analysis on the property value before that doctor built that estate home? Did they build the home because they got basically the land for nothing because it wasn't worth anything?
It isn't our understanding that they received some ridiculous discount on the land and before. Now, that being said, it's a really narrow strip of land, so its utility as far as future agricultural was a little bit limited.
Sure.
So,
okay. The last one's uncomfortable for me to ask, but I have to ask it because it's been insinuated in the public sphere. What happens? It's been insinuated that your company is bought and paid for by the solar companies, that you're giving them answers what they want to hear, and that your paycheck depends on providing those answers. One of the reasons I asked the questions in the past about your certifications, what happens if someone with your certification does provide information that ignores certain facts in the benefit of whoever's hiring you guys? Is it a you lose your license, you go to jail, both? I'm just curious. What I'd love to know.
no, I'm glad that you asked this question. So, you know, first I'll say that my company and myself and Pat McGar, we've been doing impact studies on all kinds of different properties in all kinds of various counties for a number of different kinds of clients on both sides, not just proponents, but also detractors. Second, we're bound by the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. It's also known as USPAP. Everyone who is an appraiser who appraises your house, okay, they all have to produce their report in compliance with USPAP. I am an MAI. I'm a member of the Appraisal Institute. It's my professional designation. It took me 10 years to earn. I also have state licenses, and I could lose my license and be censured by the Appraisal Institute if I've been found to do anything that was biased or misleading. The preamble of the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice indicates that appraisers are required to uphold the public trust. And it's not in my interest or anybody else who does valuation work to mislead the public in any way whatsoever.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
One further comment about that at the Zoning Board of Appeals process, all testimony is given under oath and penalty of perjury.
From all sides.
From all sides that are
everybody who
offering
testifies.
testimony, yes.
Thank you.
Miss Peters, I saw that waving hand a while back.
I'm still out here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, a couple questions. One, do you have a paper copy of the presentation that you gave a little bit earlier in there?
I did not bring a paper copy with me. There's an electronic copy. I don't know, Delbert,
Okay.
if you can.
So it
have
can be
that.
emailed out?
I can do that, yes.
Perfect, thank you. And,
There's a
Depending on the
PDF.
file size, we can certainly print it for you.
and then I'd like a business card from each and every person, just to have.
Sure.
Thank you. It was mentioned landscape on surrounding properties. So I heard you say during the presentation that you were going to put trees and stuff on your property, but have you offered to the local people that you're surrounding or different, anybody else, are you putting landscape on their property also?
We are not proposing to put landscape on other people's property.
Okay.
I think that's an interesting question. It's not something that we're
It was said, because
opposed
I
to.
caught that, I'm like, on surrounding property, and I thought,
I
I didn't
must-
say on our property.
I must have misspoken if I
Okay.
said on surrounding property. It's our intention that all of the vegetated landscape would be on our property, but to the extent neighbors have concerns and want greater, something we'd be open to considering.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, this question is for Dell. They're asking for, a reduction in the easements, and that concerns me a great deal. That is because this road is in a community growth area. It's a extremely busy road. I'm on that road quite a bit, and I am concerned about going down with that easement, just because I do know people on 6,000 Road where the new construction's going for Route 57, and when they widened that road, it went substantially into their front yard, and so do you know of any other future plans? And I know this would be more Mark possibly in his realm, but is there plans in the future to widen that road, and would that affect this then?
7,000 Road, I am not aware of any plans to widen it. Career Center Road certainly does have plans to be widened. But these extremely large setbacks, even with the reduction in setbacks, would be adequate for those road widenings.
Another question. The plants, you talked about a mix of grasses. Has there been any talk about native grasses? I know, like midwine, we try to put in, more towards the prairie look, the prairie feel of what it used to be. So if it's going to be in grasses, could it be in the native grasses? Has that been part of the plan or talks at all, or?
That's the intent. There is a specification in the application that lists the various species specifically. I'd be happy to point that out to you after, or if you want it, it's later on in the application itself.
Okay, yeah, if you could get me that information, I'd like that too.
It's in that book.
Okay, so.
I'll be
That
happy
we
to-
just got today.
I'd be happy to
so,
point it out. Yeah, I haven't committed it to
okay,
memory,
if
or
it's in your-
I can't rattle it off.
I'm
Okay,
going
and-
to ask a question regarding your question. Would they be mowed?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
The intent is that they are relatively slow growing species, so that they're not going to be mowed every week. But yes, the intent would be to maintain
Okay,
it.
so he doesn't want Indian grasses out there that grow
No,
to 10
that's
feet
right.
tall. Another question for Dell. This is the largest project that's been brought forth besides the limestone project so far?
No.
Solar project?
No, all the other projects were only 2 megawatt projects.
Right, so this is
largest.
this is the largest so
This
far.
is the largest.
Right, I guess the limestone didn't quite make it,
I think you're thinking of the bond field.
or Bondfield.
Yes.
Um,
That never even made it to application.
Gotcha. Acres. Okay, there's a, there was also mentioned that there's an agricultural conservation area on the property. Can you, I didn't grab it out of air.
Our comprehensive plan calls the area agricultural preservation or conservation area. Agricultural conservation area.
Okay.
That's the entire township.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and that's,
What did the soil and water conservation area say about this property? This project, I'm sorry.
they found no issues with floodplains or wetlands. The soil types, I think there was some severe issues with shallow excavations. The LISA score was 207.1, which is moderate preservation.
think that was my questions.
Are you finished, Miss Peters, or are you
I
still?
think so.
You think so?
Yep.
You could come back if you find something. I'll go to Mr. Tripp.
Just a quick comment, and it's been addressed, but there's one little couple words that make it stand out a little bit from Rockville Township Supervisor Moran. The first one, it says no legislative guidelines for assessment purposes for the solar farm as there is for wind farms. That was an interesting comment.
That's being addressed at the state capitol, and I believe
That is correct. Wind farms actually have a state statute that dictates how they are taxed.
Okay.
Solar farms currently do not, but it is working its way through the legislature.
And the second one would be the second thing, and this has been addressed, but the two words on the end of it makes it different. The request itself states that there is insufficient data on the impact of solar farms on property values because the installations are fairly new.
Well,
down the road, is this all gonna change? You know,
well, anything can change.
Well,
but,
I know. That's why I asked
the
the question.
data was presented by Conan Resnick about property values. So
But
it's,
again, it's pretty new and it's pretty limited.
They
Well, those were
referenced
not-
the farms in Indiana, right?
right, which have existed for a while.
Okay. So just a comment.
I mean, they can speak better on that.
They
than
were
I can.
concerned about it, and we should
They are, and you
should
know
not
what?
ignore it.
Maybe I should get to all of that. The zoning board heard this case on May 7th. We had two objectors, Miss Kathleen Kennedy and Rockville Township. You have a letter from Rockville Township in your packet, which we can go over. They've heard all the evidence, heard all the public comment, and voted 4 yeses and 1 present, which is a 5-0 vote to approve the special use permit. On the variance request, they took a vote, and it was 3-2, 3-4, 2 against. But according to the rules of the zoning board, you must have 4 concurring votes to make a recommendation. So at this point, there is no recommendation on the variances. There were 2 more absent, yes, but of the ones there was 3. That's why I always stress their attendance at the meetings is extremely important. But if you look at that, more agreed to it than didn't, but since there weren't 4 in agreement, it does not have a recommendation.
Mr. Lear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A follow-up on Ms. Peters' question. As far as 6,000 Road, at one time, there was discussion of 6,000 Road being part of a west bypass that might even then be a 4-lane road. Has there been any consideration of the impact of 6,000 becoming a 4-lane road?
Well, this is a half-mile north of 6,000 Road. So this solar farm will not affect 6,000 Road at all.
Okay, I wasn't clear on, okay.
7,000 Road does run east-west through the middle of it, but it doesn't go any farther than Career Center to the east, and it's just currently a narrow rural road. There are no plans for any expansion of it.
Chairman Wheeler.
Thank you. I did forget about a couple things, but speaking of assessments, I've actually been in contact with Springfield quite a bit on this. There is an agreement between the industry, the legislators, and the Assessors Association on everything except for the amount of improvement. Whether it's going to be on the low side, as the industry would prefer, because everybody's in business to make a buck, or the higher side, which what the assessors would agree on. The freehold leasehold has been agreed to go away. So basically there is an agreement, it just has to work its way through. It is going to be basically assessed as industrial. It's just a matter of what that value is, and it's substantially more than what farmland is. So whatever that number is, and hopefully they'll meet in the middle, take that back to your group, please, that we can meet in the middle on that. But that's that situation of where it's at, and I expect to have something done here shortly. I think we'll get that before we get a state budget, if you want my honest opinion. So the other side of it would be the electricity that's generated. This is not a community proposition, so that's why it's not shared with the local residents and they benefit in reduced bills. But I think that, and my question would be, this is the type of thing that would you approach a business who has an arc furnace locally, or somebody who may use a lot of electricity, and you guys would be able to work out better deals, provide a better operating environment for businesses in our area? Is that something that typically can happen with these type of things?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So it's difficult for a project of this size to get all of the construction financing that it needs to put in place with a lot of different small contracts. But certainly large corporate and industrial users are actively participating in the market. And they're one of the driving forces behind these types of projects. Groups that operate data centers and have huge electric demand are buying power from facilities like this because it's clean and it supports their corporate mandates, and because it's stably priced and it makes sense at the bottom line.
So it not only is a benefit for the person who wants to lease the land, the farmer, but also is an economic development tool and wrench for the community that wants to house one of these.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I would invite folks in the room to consider that at the end of the day, this, while it's in some respects industrial, is in many respects agricultural. I mean, we are literally farming the sun. And when these panels are done, this is cropland that has been fallow for a number of years and can very easily be turned back to an agricultural use.
Thank you.
Any, Ms. Peters raised her hand before you, Mr.
Ooh.
Stauffenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did find two other questions. How many inverters are on the site, and are they located on concrete pads? You said the little boxes, so I counted 21, just wondering.
That's correct. That's an approximate number.
Okay.
We're obviously going to need to refine that based on ultimately what happens with setbacks. It's been a little bit of a moving target. But yes, the intent is that those would be on concrete pads.
What kind of size are we looking at on that? Like 4x6 or?
No, there's a picture here on the left, and there's some specifications in the application that you have there. I'm estimating they're more like 8 by 12 in footprint, and then they're about maybe 8 by 16 and about 7 feet tall.
It says 8.8 tall, but.
Was there another one, Ms. Peters?
Yes. On the $400,000 decommissioning, it was kind of vague. Is that in the form of a bond or a payment to the county? How is that being handled?
I think it needs to be worked out with the county. So it needs to be a surety that satisfies the county's intention, whether it's a bond or a letter of credit or a cash deposit. I think it needs to work and satisfy the county's requirements. So typically a letter of credit.
Mr. Stauffenberg.
Thank you, Chairman. Before everything kind of went south in 2008, Career Center Road was really a hot box for development. I'm kind of surprised that Mantino hasn't said something about putting this back off of 2000 farther for future development down the road. I guess they were not in the testimony. I know they were notified.
Yes, they were both notified. Neither village had comments. I did talk to the village administrator in Bourbonnais, and he stated that they would not be objecting.
Yeah, I'm just surprised as to comment that they haven't wanted this set back farther, for development someday, after years in my time around here. Thank
As you can see, the setback on Career Center Road was 125 feet from the center line of the road. Interstate 57 is only 200 feet wide, so you can put a lot of road in there.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any others? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
Well, hang on.
Nope.
Hang on. You actually have two different actions.
Okay.
You have the special use permit, which
And
comes to you with a recommendation of approval, 5-0 from the Zoning Board of Appeals. You have the variances that have no recommendation. So you have some options there. You can decide to, well, you're gonna have to make your own findings of fact. You can decide to accept the findings of fact that are presented in the staff report, or on the findings of fact page, it's the same ones. You can create your own findings of fact, or you could send the variances back to the zoning board for further discussion.
Let's go with the first one first. Is there a motion to approve? By Mr. Wheeler, seconded by Mr. Kinzinger. Any discussion? Ms. Peters?
Just to say, I think that we need to look a little bit deeper in this, and I would vote no at this time. I'd like it to go back to ZBA.
On this part, ZBA
On this part.
was unanimous in their motion to approve.
On
For
the solar farm?
For the special use
For the
permit.
special use part, the first
Oh,
part.
okay.
Not the variances.
variance.
Okay. Okay. All right, well, then I'll change my comment. That there's a great deal of information that I would like to look through and read and study a little bit before I make my decision. I just got this book today, and I would like to read it before I voted.
So you'll have to do what you want to do. All right. It's been motioned and seconded. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now, is there a motion for the variances on the setbacks? Mr. Wheeler? To approve. Is there a second?
If you could add, accept the findings of fact to that motion, or come up with your own, that would
Okay.
be very helpful.
You accept the finding of facts that are there. Is there a second to that? Is there a second to that? No second. Motion dies for a lack of second. Is there another motion on the variances? Motion to table? Are you sending them back then? Send it back to ZBA. Is there a second to that? Mr. Tripp? Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries.
That will be sent back to the June 11th Zoning Board of Appeals hearing.
And can I ask a procedural question? If we were to elect to proceed with a project that was in compliance and was not seeking variations, would it be acceptable then to move forward?
Yes, if you were to remove the request for variances, then it does not need to go back to zoning board.
Okay.
So.
Excellent, thank you.
Are we going on to the next one?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, ZBA case 1817, request for special use permit 121-99C34 solar farm in the A1 agricultural district on a parcel generally situated in section 35 of Rockville Township. Petitioners are Alexander Real Property LLC, property owner, and Kankakee Solar 1 LLC, Microgrid Energy, Illinois, LLC applicant.
Okay. All right, this is a 2 megawatt facility. Let me get my file out here, 18-17. Located at 6523 North 2250 West Road, also in Rockville Township. You can see the outline of the property in question on the map on the screen. It is just northwest of the substation located in Rockville Township and actually sits adjacent to the solar farm you just heard. It's a 2 megawatt facility, as I said. It is owned by Alexander Real Property and is the property is owned by Alexander. And Microgrid Energy LLC is the applicant. The name of the solar farm is Kankakee Solar 1. This was also heard on May 7th by the Zoning Board of Appeals. And they voted 5-0 as well to approve this. One objector on this one was Rockville Township, which also submitted a letter very similar to the previous letter.
Do we need a motion before we go on, or are we gonna have a presentation for?
There is no, we don't have a presentation
Okay.
on this one.
Is there a motion on this? Motion to approve? Mr. Mulcahy, Is there a second? Mr. Washington, thank you. Any discussion? Mr. Kinzinger?
Refresh my memory, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this a company that we have seen a presentation from before? Seems like a new name to me.
It is a new name. You have not seen a presentation from Microgrid Energy before. If you would like to, we can put it on the screen. Are you sure? Unfortunately, I think I'm going to have to advance it for you because this has got Microsoft Edge, not Adobe. This would be the no, I don't think this is Kankakee 1, right? I have Kankakee 3 and 3B. I do not have same basic. All right, let's bring that up. Let's just bring up 3 then. Okay. Just tell me when to switch.
Your name, please?
I'm Liz Reddington. I'm the project development manager for our Illinois portfolio with Microgrid Energy. We have a local office in Chicago, Illinois, where there's a team that's solely focused on our portfolio, which is about 30 sites right now, and we're developing 70 megawatts of community solar gardens throughout the state. We also have a main office in St. Louis, where our HR department is housed and also our accounting department. And then our headquarters was recently changed to Denver, Colorado, because we are a strong player in the community solar market in the state of Colorado as well, which is a very established community solar program with Xcel as the electric utility there. So Microgrid Energy was founded in 2009. Again, we have various office locations. Our area of focus are small utility scale projects and community scale solar. We started our company with a lot of commercial rooftop installations, and we've also done ground mount carport installations as well in 9 different states. We do our own in-house financing, and to date, we've financed 120 transactions. We also have in-house development, which is the team that I'm a part of. We also manage all of our construction activity, and we do our own asset management for the operations and maintenance of the system after the system is electrified, basically. And what really sets us apart from some other solar developers is that we're a certified B Corporation. And so what that means is that we create our foundation based on how we impact the people, our profit, and the planet. So we don't hold ourselves only to the profit of our projects, but we also want to make sure that we are being a citizen of the communities that we work in and also the planet in general by installing renewable and clean energy. Next slide. These are some of our corporate customers that we've been working with in and out of the Midwest. And we are happy to provide a further client list of public entities that we work with. So we have a lot of signed contracts and agreements for community solar projects with towns and municipalities in the state of Colorado. We're also signing letters of intent with different municipalities here in Illinois specifically for behind the meter projects and for community solar programs as well. Next slide. These next 2 slides are overviews about community solar in general, and it goes into a summary of the Future Energy Jobs Act, which is why all of this active solar development is going on in the state of Illinois. And so if there's further questions about community solar in general, I can answer those, or I can dig in right into our project sites. Just to reiterate, we do intend to operate under the community solar program. So that means that we're going to have subscribers specific to the gardens that we're developing in Kankakee County. Next slide. And again, this just summarizes the program that's been set forth by ComEd and Ameren and in the state of Illinois. A subscriber has to have the maximum subscription of 40% of the garden, and community solar in general opens up the doors of renewable energy to more people. So in the past, people have only been able to install solar panels if it's appropriate for their house and where their facility is located. But now you can virtually net meter energy that's generated from the garden just by being a customer of ComEd. So it's a very unique program that's really expanding across the US in general. Next slide. Microgrid Energy intends on installing a single access tracker system at this site. So we're going to be installing modules that are procured from Tier 1 panel manufacturers. So that means that they are backed by the financing teams that invest in these types of projects. The inverters that we use are string inverters. So they're not large central units that are placed throughout the array. They're actually going to be intermittently placed every other row in this array, and they're a smaller technology in general than what you saw in the previous technology. And the noise from these inverters cannot be heard outside of the project fence. Again, we're installing the driven pile foundation racking. And so these are steel beams driven right into the ground and requires no concrete footing. The only concrete that is going to be placed in this 2 megawatt array is going to be a concrete pad for the transformer and the AC disconnect systems, the combiner boxes, things of that nature. And that concrete pad is about the size of a parking space. We're going to be interconnecting to the distribution lines that are along West 2250 North Road, or North 2250 West Road. And we'll be also utilizing the existing infrastructure of the Davis Creek substation nearby. And this technology does not create pollution, and it also does not emit any emissions. And going back to the modules, all of the Tier 1 panel manufacturers that we will be procuring from have been certified by UL. They're also certified by the NEC code, and many of these manufacturers have also been approved by the state of California, which is a very established solar market. And so they have an extensive list of approved technology that they've allowed in their state for many, many years. And so a lot of people look to that market as kind of a precedent as far as technology to use. Next slide. These are pictures of the technology and equipment of installed systems that I've worked on up in Minnesota and also in the state of Wisconsin. So important to note, the picture, even though it's labeled string inverters, it's also a photo of the tracker system in what is called cleaning mode. And so every other row will go perpendicular to one another, so that way we can easily maintain the plants that we install, the grasses that we install, to maintain all of the weed management, things that are required by the special use permit ordinance. Another thing to point out is the weather station. That is how we remotely monitor the electricity being produced by this system. So it's how we know if the system is operating to what we predict it to be working at. And it's also how we find out if there's anything wrong with the system. So if we see that it's producing a lot less than it should be, we then send out crews to make sure everything is properly working. Next slide. This slide goes into detail about the native vegetation and pollinator-friendly habitat that we want to use. Ultimately, the seed mix that we will install will be approved by the county board and also at the recommendation of the Kankakee County Soil, Water, and Conservation District. And so this goes into depth about the types of plants and why it's important to install native vegetation. It will help with stormwater reduction, erosion, and it also helps to be resilient to droughts and intense downpours. But again, it'll be at the recommendation of the county of what we will be planting. Next slide. These are pollinator habitat and native vegetation photos of installed systems to date. This may not be the type of vegetation that we install here in Illinois, but it's just an idea of how we need to make sure that we install low growth plants because we can't have the plants shade the bottom of the panels. Next. So this is a photo of the next agenda item.
Right, so
If you go backwards, I think
how far back?
I will ask you to just refer to the package at this point, and I can go off of memory what Kankakee 1 looks like, or your opening slide, actually.
Yeah, I can go back to that.
Okay.
One quick, could you elaborate a little more on being part of the pollinator-friendly program?
Yes. So a great piece of legislation is going through the House and the Senate currently with the state of Illinois legislator. It's a voluntary pollinator program that solar developers can opt into. And what that is doing, the policy advisors behind this bill have been working with the University of Illinois. They've also been working with the Department of Natural Resources on what is going to be a scorecard. And this scorecard will basically rate the types of vegetation and the pollinator species that solar developers install to ultimately show how we are positively impacting the pollinator habitat throughout the state of Illinois. That, along with the AMA legislation, along with the property tax bills, it's positively moving forward through the legislation. It's heavily sponsored and favored and slated to pass. And so Microgrid Energy wants to be a participant in that scorecard, and we intend to apply for the scorecard to get our rating once the system is installed. This is Kankakee Solar One LLC. It's a 26-acre parcel in total, and we'll mostly be using the larger parcel of the two. Both of the parcels are owned by the same landowner, Alexander Real Properties, and the system size is going to be a 2 megawatt AC system. We've incorporated all the required setbacks, so it's 100 feet from the frontage road, which is the 2250 road, and then we have 50-foot setbacks incorporated for the side and the rear property boundary lines. That pretty much sums it up. All the detailed civil engineering drawings and the topographic layers and everything that has been provided by our civil engineering firm, TRC Environmental, is included in your packet. And I can take any other questions that you may have if it's appropriate time.
Do we go for questions or go for a motion first?
I think you have to have a motion to open for discussion.
Is there a motion to approve? By Mr. Kinzinger, second by Mr. Fairfield. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Going on to ZBA case 1818, request for special use permit 121-99 C34 solar farm in the A1 agricultural district on a parcel generally situated in section 31 of Manteno Township. Petitioners are Alexander Real Properties LLC, property owner, and Kankakee Solar 3 LLC, Microgrid Energy Illinois LLC applicants.
Okay. The presentation you just heard applies to the next two cases as well. Until we get to this slide, which is the site plan for Kankakee Solar 3 LLC, which would encompass the black area on the south of this parcel. Kankakee Solar 3B is the north half. What we have here is, these are two separate 2 megawatt systems sharing one entrance road, and they are located on the same parcel, so they are separate solar farms. So right now, the agenda item is Kankakee Solar 3, which is case 18-23.
Mr. Wheeler, motion to approve. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Kinzinger. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Okay. Case 18-23 is the northern half, which is shown in the white on the screen. Same parcel, same information that was presented. The only difference here, by the way, zoning board did vote 6-0 to approve, but they did put a condition on it that landscape be added next to the Nugent house on the west side of the property.
Is there a motion? Are you making a motion? Okay. Mr. Tripp makes a motion to approve. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Washington. Okay, questions? Mr. Lear.
Site map that we've got in here looks a little different than the map I'm seeing up there.
Which case, 23? Well, my site map in my, usually is just the boundary map of the entire parcel. And not an actual site plan.
So
That is correct. That, if you look in here, that's the entire 40-acre parcel. I believe is that 40 or 160? 160-acre parcel.
Yeah.
They're only using, if you see that little waterway that's kind of diagonal.
I do.
They're using only the area west of that.
Thank you.
Mr. Kinzinger.
So the Nugent residence has been approached and accepted it, or there, how was this set, Del?
They gave no comments. They were not at the public hearing and gave no comments, but that is the home of the owner of the property, I believe, from the first solar farm you heard today.
So the motion before us, how does that relate to the comments of the zoning board that they work with Nugent Farms, our Nugent residents?
They placed a condition on it that landscaping be placed along that side of the solar farm.
And that's part of our motion also then?
Yes. Any further discussion, questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Going on to ZBA case 1819, a request for a rezoning from C2 General Commercial District to R1 Single Family Residential District on a parcel generally situated in section 26 of Pembroke Township. Petitioner is Mark Hodge, property owner and applicant.
Okay. This is case 1819? All right.
No.
All right, this is not a solar farm, guys. Okay.
Not yet.
This is a request to rezone the property outlined on the screen up there from C2 commercial to R1 single family residential. The property contains 2 single-family residential homes. It was zoned C2 commercial in 1967 with our original adoption of our zoning ordinance and map with no regards to what was actually there. This is located on 4500 East Road in Pembroke Township. Mr. Hodge is the owner, came in asking for a building permit to repair these homes, and that's when we realized they are zone C2 and we cannot issue a building permit because they're not commercial structures. So if you look at our comprehensive plan, it reflects the fact that we have an overabundance of residential and commercially zoned properties stemming from the 1967 adoption, and that comprehensive plan recommends that we reduce it when and where we can.
Is there a motion by Mr. Kinzinger, seconded by Mr. Stauffenberg? Any discussion? Mr. Payton, is that a question?
No.
Oh. Oh, you wanted to second it.
Right.
Seconded by Mr. Payton. No questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Yeah.
No.
Should
Last
have.
is better. ZBA case 1820, request for rezoning from A1 agriculture to I2 in general industrial district on a parcel generally situated in section 6 of Junior Township. Petitioner is Gregory M. Lambert, property owner and applicant.
Also not a solar farm. This is property located about a quarter-mile north of the hamlet of St. George in Junior Township. Mr. Lambert owns the property outlined in, well, he owns all that property, but the property outlined in blue was rezoned back in the 1980s to general industrial. I believe there used to be some type of factory there at the time. Mr. Lambert is now using the property and has been for a long period of time for a metal fabrication operation, which is doing well apparently, and he needs to expand. Unfortunately, the property around him is zoned A1, even though he owns it. It is zoned A1 agriculture, and you cannot do metal fabricating businesses in the A1 district. So he is asking to rezone the area outlined in red there to I2 industrial to match his current operation and to be able to expand it into that area. Zoning board heard this case on May 7th and voted 5-0 to recommend approval, and there were no objectors present.
Is there a motion? Motion by Mr. Fairfield, seconded by Mr. Mulcahy to approve. Is there any discussion? Questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Pardon? Oh, mark him as present. Is this the one we're doing right now? So I'll mark him as, where is he up here? Present. Okay, ZBA case 1821, request for a special use permit 12199-34 solar farm in the A1 agricultural district on a parcel generally situated in section 34 of St. Anne Township. Petitioners Larry and Linda Kleinert, property owners, and SVCSG St. Anne LLC applicant.
Okay, this was heard on May 14th by the Zoning Board of Appeals. It's another 2 megawatt community solar garden. Zoning Board recommends approval 6-0. There were no objectors present. Would you like to hear a presentation on this one?
Is this a new?
It's a different company, Sunvest Solar Incorporated. No. But if you'd like to hear it.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Maybe if we could just hear a little bit about the company, their experience, the other things that they've done. We kind of get the solar industry and what it would kind of look like, just, you know, I want to say amended version.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and put up the site plan from your PowerPoint.
Sure.
Where would...
All right. No. Okay, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. My name is Patrick Dalseth, and I am with Sunvest Solar Incorporated. And Sunvest Solar has established a project company, which is the applicant for this project, and it's SVCSG St. Anne 1 LLC. So the project company is, the SV is Sunvest CSG Community Solar Garden, St. Anne, which is the substation nearest to this project, and 1 being our first project. So a little bit about Sunvest Solar. We are based, the headquarters is based in Pewaukee, Wisconsin, which is about 17 miles due west of downtown Milwaukee. But we have an Illinois office in Geneva, Illinois, right on the Fox River. And we opened that office specifically for the Illinois market for this Future Energy Jobs Act, which is, as you've heard, is why all of these solar developers are coming to Illinois to take advantage of these opportunities, the 3,000 megawatts that will be available for solar projects. SunVest got its start in 2008 as a residential rooftop solar installation company. In 2012, they branched out from the residential rooftop to C&I, commercial industrial users. So we would put rooftop panels on industrial buildings or manufacturing buildings and ground mount, smaller ground mount arrays than what you've typically seen in the last couple of months, but for use behind the meter for those specific companies. And then recently, starting also in 2012, we opened up an East Coast office in New Jersey. As you'd heard on a previous petition, the power rates and the market for power on the coast, the power prices are higher, so there's a better rate of return. So we have done several of these 1 megawatt to 2 megawatt, up to 5 megawatt ground mount arrays for several utilities out on the East Coast. So for the last 5 years, we've had that experience with these larger ground mount arrays. Again, we are here in Illinois to put together maybe 20 projects, 40 megawatts of this overall program, and we have projects everywhere from Stevenson County up by Freeport, and I'm all the way down near the town of Marion in southern Illinois, and all parts in between. We are focused in the ComEd service territory of these 20 projects. 12 of them, 13 of them will be in ComEd, and then the balance will be in the Ameren market, which is central and southern Illinois. That's background on our company. Be happy to answer questions specifically about this this community solar garden near St. Anne.
Mr. Kinzinger.
Just information, is this particular company selling to private property owners surrounding, or do they sell back to the utility?
No, this project will participate in the community solar program, wherein we will have to go find subscribers for this project, hopefully locally.
Could you speak about this being a fixed tilt system?
Sure.
It's a little different than the other ones we've heard.
Right. So SunVest Solar, all of our panels are going to face south. On the other projects that you saw tonight, you saw the rows of the tilt. They were going north and south. So these rows of panels are going east and west, and they will be permanently facing south. They will not move. The height of the top of these towers, not towers, the solar panels will maybe be about 9.5 feet tall, based on the latitude here in this part of Illinois. To maximize the sunlight over the course of 365 days.
Is there a motion to approve? Mr. Kinzinger, second by Mr. Fairfield. Any more questions or discussion? Seeing that, oh, Mr. Washington.
Specifically, why are the panels going to be facing south?
Facing south would provide the maximum exposure.
Because they're fixed.
Because they're fixed.
Any others? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. ZBA case 1822, request for rezoning from R1 residential district to A1 agricultural district and special use permit 121-9934, solar farm in the A1 agricultural district on a parcel generally situated in section 17 of Momence Township. Petitioners are the estate of Gary Thifault, care of Ray Simpson, independent executor, property owner, and SV CSG Moments 1 LLC applicant. Yes.
Documentation on that, I'm still a little lost.
You may not have it. This one was tabled by zoning board on Monday night, so it's not before you now. So we had to put it on the agenda because we didn't know what was going to happen Monday night.
We can't vote on this.
No, this one will not be presented.
This will be coming back.
It's still in zoning board. It'll be heard at the June 11th zoning board meeting.
Then, is there any old business?
I believe Mr. Olson had few things to say.
Watch it.
Very short.
Watch it.
You're not very short. You're kind of just big.
Let the dog.
Oh,
Thank you. Good morning. I just had some updated ridership numbers for everybody for rural transit. At the end of April, we did our third quarter requisition for January 1st through March 31st. So for third quarter, we are up about 15% for that quarter than we were a year ago. Overall, we are up about 26% this fiscal year over last fiscal year. It's about 5,800 rides. Overall, this quarter, we provided 9,613 trips, and of those trips, 3,953 were on our demand response. That's the dial-a ride service, and then 4,600 were the Moments commuter deviated fixed route, which is typically employment-based jobs. That's my update.
wow. Any questions?
Riveting.
Yes. Thank you to you. Any new business?
I do. This is old. I do have a question for Dell regarding old business.
Sure.
And one of the board members asked me this.
He's speaking.
That we have to establish when we go against a ZBA recommendation. Is that something that we always have had to do? Because we failed to do it at the full board, and that's why we have to backtrack and do the findings of fact. Is that something that we've always had to do in the past?
Yes.
Okay, so this is nothing new. We just.
It is not. It's been a few years since it's occurred.
Okay.
It doesn't occur that often, but it does occur.
So it's required as part of the process to do that. Okay, and so that's why we're backtracking to.
Usually it
to get that
occurs at the
finding of
planning and zoning level, not the full county board level. We have had to do it with this committee before. I don't remember ever having to do it with the county board. Usually when it gets to the county board level, it's gone through the zoning board, it's gone through the planning and zoning, county board, in almost every instance, agrees with their recommendation. So this is a little different then, but you must have findings throughout, the zoning board hears all the testimony. They consider all of the information, and the county board has made them the group that does that, so that you don't have to. And then they make a recommendation to you. If you find something in the record that you don't agree with, then you need to state that in a finding that you find that it's not right. You can either create your own findings, you can send it back to Zoning Board of Appeals for them to reconsider that particular item. They may come back to you with the same recommendation they had before.
Sure. I think it's important that the committee knows and those board members that voted no, that I just didn't make this up or you just didn't make it up. This is part of what we've done in the past.
It's actually rooted in case law.
Okay.
From cases that have gone before the courts. And when they do go to the court is only making their decision on the record. They generally do not call in witnesses or hear any new testimony. That's why it's very important to build that record and make your decision based on that record and only that record. Not what Joe told you at the coffee shop. That's not on the record.
Mr. Lear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't recall for sure, but I thought when we had the landfill vote and it was rejected, there was a procedure where those who voted no had to make a statement in terms of finding of fact.
That's not zoning, though.
Okay.
That's different.
That was different?
That is different.
Mr. Washington.
As far as I know, that's different.
I do recall having to state our own facts about a case. I don't remember what the case was, but I do recall us doing it.
At least a year or two ago, it was this committee, and I handed out sheets for you all to write down your own findings, and we read them into the record and did all of that. Yes. If you don't state that finding, and there ends up being a court case, the judge will not have any way of knowing why you voted the way you did, and that could be very important unless you want to lose the court case. So. My understanding is no. A board member who voted no, and you can check with the state's attorney on that, a board member that voted no could ask for it to be reconsidered.
His vote, you mean?
Yes.
Yes.
Miss Peters,
We were asked to fill out a form, and there was a deadline put on that. What if we don't do it by the deadline? Okay, but that was stated also that we were going to do that in front of the full board anyway. So do we do both, or can we just do in front of the full board at the June meeting?
I was attempting to assemble it all and read it into the record at the same time.
So that we didn't have to say our testimony in the meeting, or we still will say it at the meeting?
You might address that to the state's attorney, why he recommended we do it that way, or else we would have had to call a special meeting and have all the cost of a special meeting just to do
I'm
the
not looking
findings
for
of
that.
fact.
Just wondering why it was done the way it was done.
I don't know. Someone
State's
called the
attorney.
newspaper about it too, and that was a member of this board to alert them to the fact. They FOIA'd all of your responses, so if you want to wait till the full board and spring it on the full board, that's fine. At the same time, that would be okay too. So
This is not to change the vote.
no, not
This
at
is
all.
just to clarify
No, I know.
why you
You
voted
and the
the way you
board.
did and
Just finding out
to
what
protect the county and the county.
what would happen if we didn't fill it out. That's all.
Well, then your thoughts won't be heard. Okay.
Mr. Washington.
Oh yeah, again. The thoughts will be heard. You will be asked at full board which one of the findings of fact that you disagreed with and why. Now, if you choose not to answer, that's on your response. You're totally your call. You know, but just consider the position that it puts the rest of the board in when you make that decision.
Mr. Washington?
In order to send it back, do we have to wait till the full board, or can it be sent back now?
Gonna have to get legal clarity on that, I
I
believe.
don't think so. I think we have to wait till the full board for a motion to reconsider. I think because that's where the decision was made. And so if somebody would like to make that motion on the floor, that would be appropriate, and I will find out.
Okay. I mean, was that new business? No, that was new business. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Momentarily, I gotta think about something. They brought up the relative point. If it's not on the agenda, then how do you have a motion to reconsider? With this committee, would it be, but it's not on this agenda?
That is a question for the state's attorney, not me.
So
I have never,
Make a motion to make the motion. We could do it.
It's old business? Isn't it old business?
Yeah, not clarified. It's old business. It could be old business. Yeah. So if somebody makes a motion,
Then we can send it on to full board.
that's inappropriate, at least we try.
Is there anything you wanted to say, Mr. Washington? Mr. Washington and Mr. Tripp seconds it. Oh, we're sending this on to the full county board
With the recommendation to
to reconsider the vote on the Highland Road. Yes, on the Highland Road one, the only one that was voted no on. Okay. Any questions? All in favor, say aye. Most, all opposed? Motion carries. Motion to adjourn by Mr. Legess. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Mulcahy. Is there a second? Is there a second? Second by Mr. Fairfield. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, motion carried.
so let me